Uh-oh. Guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike? Leslie, guess what today?
It's Tuesday. Gotta do a hop on Tuesday.
Oh man, not another day like last Tuesday.
Sunny Digital.
Got the club going up on the Tuesday.
The big news.
News? What news?
Sorry.
What?
All right, Lee. But this is beyond news. This is like Pearl Harbor or the Kennedy assassination. It's like not even news, it's total shock.
Oh, come on, Jerry, please.
Hello everyone and welcome to article number 2 of this Tuesday Newsday, March 5th, 2019. Some of this will look familiar to you. We've done it the last few weeks in a row, but I'll just kind of go over it quickly for us. Our learning goal is to determine 2 or more central ideas of a text and analyze how their development over the course of that text, including how they interact and build on one another. The scale should look familiar. A 4 means that you can identify the central ideas and the evidence that the author uses to prove his or her point, as well as how the ideas build on one another. A 3 means that you can identify the central ideas and the evidence that the author uses to prove his or her point. A 2 means you can identify the central ideas, but that you're not really showing me the evidence, like how the author gets there. And a 1 means that you are unsure of how to find the central idea. To receive a unit and a half for today's article, you must highlight or underline the main idea, circle the evidence that the author uses to support his or her point, and put a box around any other central ideas in the text. Remember, too, that there's vocab that goes along with this stapled to the packet that you should have in front of you. The 4 skills that we're going to work on are identifying the topic, summarizing the story, identifying the first and last sentences, and then looking for those repeated ideas because, as we know, when an author repeats ideas, it usually means that there's some level of importance placed on those, and it will generally lead us to that main idea. I thought that article number 2 was kind of neat, so I figured I would give it a shot. A 50-year-old scientific message stuffed in a bottle was found. Written on 3/4/19. As we know, that was yesterday and was National Grammar Day. And it begins this way. Candy Duke and her husband Jim spend their weekends combing for treasure. They bring a lunch and make a day of it at the Padre Island National Seashore in Texas. They keep their eyes peeled for shells, sea glass, and bottles, some green, some brown, some barnacled, some clear, and wave-beaten. Candy estimates that they've stumbled across at least 100 little glass vessels, plus hydraulic jacks, trash cans, and I can't tell you how many nets we have come off of who knows what. Some of the haul goes straight into the trash, just to get it up off the sand. But they salvage their favorites and arrange them across their yard in Corpus Christi. One recent Saturday, Jim came across a bottle with something to say. Through the scuffed glass, they could make out a yellowing piece of paper, almost the color of the sand. It was wound in a tight scroll, and it bore an instruction scribbled in big capital letters. Break bottle. Paragraph 5 now. But, Candy says, the couple had no plans to do that. They figured they collect bottles. They don't bust them. So she and Jim set out to free the thing inside without destroying the rest of it. Paragraph 6. The couple took the bottle home and got to work. They broadcast their efforts on Facebook Live. Jim went at it with a standard wine bottle opener, while Candy's brood of birds, several dozen parakeets, lovebirds, cockatiels, finches, and canaries that she raised from a local pet store, chirped loudly in the background, and their deaf rescue cat, handsome, preened, disinterestedly on a chair. It's a real hard rubber cork, Jim said, as Candy filmed. He needed to put more muscle into it. He stood up to get more leverage. By George, it may be coming, he said, cranking his wrist. He grunted a bit. The thing didn't budge. Come on, baby, Jim muttered to the cork, scrunching up his face as he tried to wriggle it free. Thank goodness there's no wine in there. We'd all be crying at this point. They finally speared it with an ice pick. With a little shimmy, the stopper came loose. Since the paper had been shoved all the way down to the bottom, they needed to use tweezers to fish it out. As they reached for it, Candy and Jim wondered if they'd won something. A cruise maybe, or free tacos. Not quite. When they liberated the paper and unrolled it, they discovered that it was a postcard. It was still nice and dry. It was supposed to be filled out and mailed back to the U.S. Bureau of Commercial Fisheries. Whoever found the bottle was supposed to jot down the date and place they'd encountered it. The office was trying to track down the effects of its surface currents on young shrimp moving from offshore spawning grounds to inshore nursery grounds. Anyone who returned the postcard would receive 50 cents for their trouble. On the Facebook video, Candy seemed a little let down. The couple signed off quickly, and maybe a little sheepishly. But it was no cruise, or even a plate of tacos. It was kind of like we had built up all of this drama, and it was just this thing. 50 cents, Candy says now. But off camera, she filled the postcard out anyway, made a keepsake photocopy, and sent the original on its way to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It's called the NOAA for short. The group inherited many of the duties of the old bureau. She soon heard from Matthew Johnson, the acting lab director at NOAA's Galveston Laboratory Southeast Fisheries Science Center. He said he shed some light on what she'd found. This little bottle had taken a long swim. It had been in the water since 1962 or 1963. One of 7,863 that had been released in clusters across the northwestern Gulf of Mexico. Of these, 12% were recovered within 30 days of being set adrift, according to a 1979 NOAA report. A lot of that stuff disappears into the abyss, Johnson says. It turns out that Candy and Jim had happened upon the legacy of a citizen science project that wrapped up decades ago. At the time, unleashing a school of bottles and asking people to report their sightings was a cutting-edge way to figure out what's going on and relate back to ocean currents to animal abundance, Johnson says. It was a way of retracing the buoyant journey from point A to point B. Johnson has worked at NOAA for 4 years, and his wife had been there for 20. And this find was definitely out of the ordinary. We have not seen one of these recovered at all in a long time, Johnson says. The new data wasn't useful, really, so many decades after the project was over. But a deal was a deal, and Johnson offered Candy the 50 cents anyway. She declined. The bottle was still a treasure, though, and she plans to store it in a shadow box, safely away from the waves. And see, here we are back at the worksheet that asks us to dive in and look at the 4 skills in identifying the main idea. I think identifying the topic is that a bottle was found with a message inside. Summarizing the story in 10 to 12 words, I think forces us to look a little bit broader than that. I think we have to look at what came of it, what was expected from the bottle. And I think we see that the message itself had to do with tracking fisheries. Well, not so much fisheries. That's who you were supposed to send it to. Tracking the patterns and movements of young shrimp. The first and last sentence, I'm going to go over and grab those. The first sentence is, Candy Duke and her husband Jim spent their weekends combing for treasure. They bring a lunch and make a day of it at the Padre Island National Seashore in Texas. And the last sentence, the bottle is still a treasure though, and she plans to store it in a shadow box safely away from the waves. Repeated ideas. I think one of the things that came up a lot had to do with tracking the patterns of the shrimp. Make that red. A second repeated idea is that the Dukes, Jim and Candy, are collectors. And in this case, I thought they had found something valuable, and it turns out that it wasn't that valuable. And then a final idea that this was old and well, pretty cool, but useless information at this point. If you recall, they kind of were able to do some testing about how long that bottle had been in the ocean. They figured it was released somewhere around 1962 or 1963. Since then, well, you know, the internet and all, and I'm sure that was a big factor in making message in bottles useless. So, as always, I am not going to give you the main idea of the article. Hopefully you're able to use what we have written here to come to a conclusion about what the main idea of the article is. With that, I will leave you to work. Bye.